So, you're thinking about being a trainer? Well, let's talk about that. I have been in the industry for over 20 years. Just hard to believe that a 5-year-old would get started in the education sector, but alas, here we are. So there's a few things that I'd like to talk about this evening, but I'm not going to be doing all of the talking. So unmute yourselves and use those reaction buttons and use the chat because I really want to hear from you. Now, show of hands, how many of you have attended awful training sessions in your life? Awful. Let's see those hands. I give it 2 hands because I've been to some terrible training sessions in my life. So how many of you have ever attended phenomenal training sessions before? Let's see those hands. Angela's like, yeah, 3 stars on Yelp, maximum. Right, okay, so for those of you who have been to phenomenal training sessions before, unmute yourselves and tell me what was phenomenal about it.
An energized presenter.
Energy, I love it. What else?
Engagement.
Engagement, yes. Tell me more about engagement. What does engaging mean?
Saying yes. No, involving the audience in actually learning.
Okay, all right. And Sue also said engaging in the chat. Thank you for that. Anybody else have any things that they thought was just phenomenal in a particular training setting?
Gave me what I needed to use.
Yeah, it was useful. Maybe you walked away with a new tool. Maybe you walked away with a new idea. Maybe you walked away with a new connection. Hey, this is someone who can mentor me, or this is someone that I could really collaborate with on the next project. All right, Tina said hands-on. All right, so these are all great things. I love these ideas that it's engaging, you get what you need, it's hands-on, it's interactive, it's energetic. Yes to all of it. So that's my first challenge for anyone who wants to consider being a trainer for TLI, Toastmasters Leadership Institute, is can you be energetic, interactive, engaging, all of the things for your audience? I hope so. That's something that we're looking for. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you've seen in training sessions, like some of those tools or techniques or different types of props or some visual aids that really turned that session into something interactive, engaging, energetic?
For me, Rachel, it was the session you had where we had to scan the QR code and everyone had to go around and fill in the questions or take a survey, or I really like that, where we actually had to get up out of our chairs and go and do something.
Okay, so we're doing things, it's hands-on, we've got tools and techniques. All right, anybody else?
I would say a combination. Can you hear me, Rachel? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I failed to do a quick check. I love a good combination of information and practice. Combination and practice. A few years ago, we talked about the difference between andragogy and pedagogy. So keeping the adult learner engaged, I think there's a little bit of an art and a science there. So being informational, but yet giving the audience the ability to practice what they just learned in some way. I think it helps anchor the learning.
Absolutely. There has to be a point. It could be all entertainment and jazz hands, and we're tapping and we're doing all the things and really entertaining. But if we didn't walk away with, wow, I've really got something that I can use, I have something that I learned that I can go and apply, then it was just a good time and a good show, but it wasn't necessarily practical. We want something that's pragmatic and practical. I like what Maria said about it's an art and a science. My background is learning science. There is a lot of science to this. There's the Blooms of the world and the Maslows and the Gardners and the Knowles and all of these philosophers and all of these scientists. We're not going to talk about any of those folks this evening, although if you're curious, I'd be happy to have that conversation at another time, because I could geek out on the learning science all day, because that's just who I am. But there is a little bit of the art meets the science when it comes to delivering a training session. You already said it: engaging, energetic, interactive. So there are techniques there that are part of the art and part of the science woven together, for sure. Well, Tina also talked about one of the sessions, I think she was referring to the one at the conference where we got up and moved around. Well, TLI is online. So we have to also think about, how do we engage an online audience? Because we have to work that much harder, or we're creating Zoom fatigue, which is a real thing. So how do we use our spaces, like the X and the Y axis, but then how do we also use this Z axis to go forward and backward? How do we get people to be engaged? So far, I've had you engage in certain ways, and we're on Zoom. What are those ways that you've engaged so far?
Told us to unmute.
Unmute yourself. What else?
Answer questions.
Answer questions.
Raise your hand.
Yeah,
Or respond, react.
either your physical hands or using the raise hand feature or any of those icons at the bottom.
Share ideas.
Sharing ideas. We're also using the chat. There's so many different ways that you can leverage all of these things. So speaking of chat, I want to pick up on a comment that Vicky made in the chat, saying that trainers need to facilitate learning, not just present. So I'd like to hear from all of you. What is your interpretation of what Vicky just said about that? Trainers need to facilitate learning, not just present.
I think it's all of the things we mentioned earlier, because if you just present, meaning you just lecture, adults are going to tune out and not absorb any of the information. So for me, to facilitate learning is to engage the audience, to involve the audience, and have them doing something. Also making sure to touch all those wonderful learning styles that we talk about frequently, so that we also touch people who learn by hearing, by seeing, and by doing, and most especially the doing. I think more people learn by doing than are willing to admit. And that's, to me, that's what it means to facilitate, because just sitting there lecturing like the talking head on the evening news doesn't get the learning done.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a great explanation. So we've thrown a specific word around a few times that I want to talk about here real quick. We've talked about adult learning, engaging adults. Have you ever tried to lecture a 9-year-old? And how well has that worked for you? Hearing laughter. I'm seeing those heads shaking like, oh no. Oh no, here are the parents and grandparents in the room, right? Or the teachers even, or the siblings, right? Like adults and kids are similar in that fashion, that they don't want to be talked at. They don't want to be talked to. They want to be talked, give me a preposition. With. They want to be talked with. This is a conversation that we can engage with and we can interact with one another. So trainers need to facilitate learning, not just present. Kathy, you had your hand raised. I'd like to hear from you on that comment as well.
Oh, actually, Vicky took the words right out of my mouth, as well as Marie. So we're all just thinking along the same lines, because it's true. Absolutely true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of people in the corporate space are getting away from the word trainer and they're embracing the word facilitator. I don't know if in your workplace or other places that you've been that you've heard the difference between a trainer versus a facilitator. There are clinical definitions, certainly, but let's just hang on that word facilitate for a minute. Facilitate and facilitator. Talk to me about that. What are your impressions of that?
Well, when you're training, you're training. It's like a coach. You're like coaching a football, or like anything like that sport. You're telling them how to act, and so they're following your direction, so to speak. They're a facilitator. You're facilitating the situation. You're giving other people the chance to act on their own, to give their own ideas, to give their own feedback. You'll throw out, it's like oh gosh, I'm using all these little metaphors. It's like throwing out the fishing pole, and hoping to catch the fish. You're facilitating the situation, and you're catching all of these other answers and good ideas. Is that right?
What does everybody think of what Kathy just said?
Yes, I agree. It's like you're maybe get a conversation going between everybody and just try to keep that going by asking some questions, throwing it out there. And before you know it, you might have people training each other.
That's right.
To me, that's really an important part, is that opportunity to learn from each other. It's not about me, the trainer. It's not about me, the facilitator. It's really about all of us together. And I think a trainer, I'm always very wanting to know what everybody else knows. I always learn something from the sessions, even if I'm leading the sessions.
Mm-hmm. That's the hope. Yeah, Maria.
I'll just add that although it might be a little bit of semantics, I've been a trainer and now I'm a facilitator, that's my field. I think there's a technique, there's study that is involved in ensuring that we're assisting. For me, facilitation is helping that person get something out of the session, understanding what the needs are. So understanding the audience, understanding the concept, and something that I usually try to get across when I'm training trainers is that the trainer is the leader in the room, in the space. So we're here to help that person identify what their strengths are, what their opportunities are, and help them find that learning for themselves. So kind of leading, guiding. So I always think of the trainer as the leader in that space. I used to say the classroom, but of course we're virtually in most cases now, so the leader in that space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Bob, you have your hand raised.
Yes, ma'am, I do. I feel that it's a matter of semantics, but I think Vicky is right on point, and so is Kathy. I look at the word trainer. I think of someone who is informed to inform, but we're compelled to learn. We're kind of put under the pressure of being forced to, or being talked down to, as we have one in a superior position as to the trainee or the one who is not aware of the venue, the ideas that are being taught. A facilitator, I would say, is a person who is an aid, a guide, who assists, who allows one to grow and to be nurtured. So I think there's a vast difference. I know they're sisters and cousins, but I really think that that's the way to look at it. And I'm appreciative of the fact that facilitator, but facilitator can mean much more, but I'll leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really depends on the goal of the session. This session right here, we're not training you to do anything. I'm sorry to say, if you came for that, you can leave the Zoom call if you like. You can give me 0 stars on if you like. But for TLI, when we're trying to train people on what their role is as an officer and how to make their club operate in an optimal fashion, that is more of a training circumstance where we want them to walk away with a certain set of skills to be able to operate as that specific officer. A session like this is a little bit more of a facilitation because I'm trying to be very cognizant of making sure that everybody has an opportunity to participate and contribute. And if you noticed, when somebody asked a question, I didn't answer the question. I just threw it out to everybody else. Hey, what does everybody else think? I'm just trying to provide a space for learning to take place, even though we're not being trained on a specific skill or set of skills, but it is a conversation to facilitate, and hopefully you've learned something so far. Let's see those thumbs up if you learned something so far, or the hearts. And if you didn't, we'll ask you again later. All right. When we're talking about TLI, it is online. So I want to talk a little bit about the role of a trainer and a facilitator for TLI. And we're going to pop some links into the chat as well for your professional development. So one of the links that I want to put in there is called the Training Basics. This comes straight from Toastmasters International. There are lots of goodies in here about how do you prepare for a session? How do you anticipate the learner needs and things to consider for that opportunity in that session? So it is a PDF. We'll probably have a link for it as well. There it is, it's in the chat. Some of these links you actually have to log into your Toastmasters account and then it will come up. This is a fantastic resource because it does dig into the nuts and bolts and some of that science that Maria was talking about with learning and what do adults want in a training session. And if that's what they want, how do you deliver it? Because that's important. So TLI, we have a series of dates and we'll be talking about those. The sessions are 50 minutes. And what we usually ask people to do is give us about 5 minutes up at the beginning for the introduction and get people settled. And then for your own introduction, because you will have a moderator accompany you in that breakout room. So usually about 5 minutes to get everybody else set up, you're introduced, and then you kick off your session. And probably about 40 minutes of presentation, and then finishing it off 5 minutes for questions. So here's another question. As a presenter, trainer, facilitator, when should we entertain questions? Should we have them throughout or should we have them wait until the end? What are your thoughts?
Yes to both.
Yes to both. Okay.
It depends.
Okay.
Sometimes it's better to have questions throughout, and sometimes it's better to wait until the end. It just depends on what the presenter wants to share. If they have a lot of information to share, maybe save the questions to the end.
All right. What does everybody else think?
I think it's a good idea. Depends what kind of.
It's the emotional intelligence of the presenter facilitator to gauge his audience, to be receptive, to get a feel for the group, their responses, their nodding of the heads, whatever it might be. That's critical. So questions can arise at any time where the presenter facilitator feels the need to present a question to engage the audience if they're sleeping or dozing off or something of that nature.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Keep them engaged.
Yeah, Sandra, what do you want to contribute?
Well, a long time ago, and I'd like your opinion on this, in a training program that I took for trainers, I was taught that if you keep talking and they've got a question and they don't get the answer to the question, they stay stuck where their question popped into the head. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I've always used that as a guideline for me to kind of give space for questions so that everybody can keep moving along with the train.
I agree with that philosophy. I think that that is really what separates a skilled facilitator from a speech giver, because they are two different things. They're very different. Giving a speech is generally, I'm just going to motor on through it and maybe I'll pick up on some of the audience reactions, but it really isn't interactive in nature. Not that that's bad. That's the function of a speech. But the function of a training session is different than a speech.
Maybe set the ground rules at the beginning and just tell people, if please, raise your hand if you have any questions, and I'll stop right away if if it's something we need to go over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it's the person has asked the question and you know that you're going to address that topic at a later time, and you can thank them for the question. Great question. Put a pin in that because we're actually going to address that momentarily. But if it's in the moment and their question is directly related to what you're talking about in that particular time and space, why not take it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There has been many times when a speaker would say, we'll address that at the end, and the end never comes. The question never gets answered. So in my world of working with adults, specifically farmers, once there's a question, it needs to be addressed because that's the learning opportunity. And if you address that question right there and then, it means you've addressed that need at that moment. So you hit the nail on its head in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, I want to hang on one of the words that Andy just said here is need. There's a great concept out there called the 5 moments of need. It's all about when people need to learn things. And one of our moments of need is when you start something new. It's a new job, it's a new position, it's a new role, it's a new whatever. We are going to have a lot of first-time officers at TLI, and this is their moment of need because they've never done it before. And this is where we need to address that need. Maria, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, Kathy was first.
Well, actually, I figured you would probably be asking the same question because for me, Andy said it right. You get that thought in your head and you can't move forward. It's like a thorn, and it's your brain is all of these kind of different neurons out there, and all of a sudden, well, for me anyway.
Right.
And so I heard someone say, I don't know, maybe it was Maria or Sal, and you're in that TLI and someone has these questions, and maybe just that question will bring up something that you hadn't even thought of. And so that will only add to the presentation. And yeah, I like it. And then I don't have to think of everything. So you just answer all those questions in there as they
That's
come
great.
up.
Thank you. Teachable moments. Look for those. Yeah. Maria, did you have something else that you wanted to add?
Related, I think it all goes back to the expertise of the facilitator in that sometimes, and we know the content that we receive for TLI is handed to us with a limited amount of time. And part of being a facilitator also implies knowing your audience. There's some verbal processors that can easily take over or even take you in a totally different tangent. So it goes with the facilitator role to lead, to know when to get control back of the question, and to either identify it as something that is coming later, write it on the board as something that you want to address a little later. In my experience, having checkpoints tends to help in those situations. Now, if I'm doing a 4-hour class or a full day class or a week workshop, then I have a lot more freedom in terms of when to address those questions, especially if what's coming later is going to be, if what we're teaching now is relevant to understanding a concept that is coming later. But if it's something that can be progressively addressed, I think it depends on the personality and the context that we're facilitating as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And being in a 50-minute time constraint can be difficult to address all the questions that come up. So have any of you ever leveraged the usage of a parking lot? All right, could somebody share with the rest of the group, what is a parking lot and how do you use it? Marie, go ahead.
Well, to my understanding, we always use a parking lot. If someone asks a question that I, as the facilitator, don't feel is relevant to that particular moment, put it in the parking lot and address it later. And to Andy's point, I always leave myself enough time to go back to those points in the parking lot to make sure that we did address them. And sometimes I have found, especially at TLI, is that I have to follow up with people, pardon me, in an email or in some other fashion. But at least they know that their questions are being addressed and they were heard. So that parking lot is just a place to keep those questions that can't be addressed in that particular moment.
Yeah, that's great. It does a couple things psychologically for the learners. One of the things is that it lets me know as a learner that you've taken my question seriously because you wrote it down in a visible place that everyone else can see that my question was taken seriously. The other thing that it does is it helps them understand that you are going to make that a priority at another time whenever it is appropriate. Sometimes questions go on the parking lot because I don't know the answer and I have to go look it up or find somebody who does know the answer, and then I can get back to you. And sometimes it is used because it is a very important thing that we want to talk about, but it's not relevant right this second, but maybe it will be later. Whether it's that same day or it's, for those of us who are in this industry, we might do day-long presentations or weeks-long presentations and courses that we want to make sure that we remember that this is something that is relevant for sure.
So, Rachel, I've seen this technique used really well in some other training sessions that I've attended, where there is actually a parking lot attendant that you as a trainer don't address the question. Somebody who's an expert in that area can address the questions while you are facilitating. There may be general questions, but you can take a lot of time away from your 50 minutes to address them. So somebody answering them in the chat while they're being asked, that parking lot attendant can really save you a lot of time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And our TLI trainers usually will have one moderator, if not two, in that Zoom room with them. And that's a great space for some of the moderators to moderate the chat if there are some questions that come up. Sometimes they're relevant to the discussion, in which case they can raise their hand and say, hey, trainer, would you mind addressing this for the group? And sometimes it's either off topic, like, hey, when are we serving lunch? Or something like that, or it's something that may just be a quick answer. Does anybody have any this, or has anybody ever heard of this thing, or point me in the direction of whatever. What did she just talk about? Can you post a link in there? I've never used that tool before. And that's where we can use those moderators to address anything that's going on in the chat as well. One technique that I really like that I should have done, but I didn't, is have everybody, if they've come with questions, drop them into the chat, and I will make sure that I pivot my presentation in that direction to make sure that I am addressing the needs of that group. Because I'll tell you what, I may be the subject matter expert, but I've already mastered this stuff. It's your turn to learn it and get proficient in it and even achieve mastery. So I don't have to put my own focus on myself. I need to put the focus on the needs of those who are attending. They came for a specific reason. So if you throw it out at the beginning, hey, put your questions in the chat at any time, love to talk about it. And you can gear your presentation in that direction too. Don't be afraid to pivot and meet people where they are instead of, I'm sorry, I have a slide deck and I got to get into the next slide and it's not on this slide, so I can't talk about it. You know what? Sometimes you just need to scrap your slides. Sometimes you do. Like, be in the moment, look for those teachable moments, because that's where the learners are pointing you to their own needs. And it truly is about them. Vicki put an article that I really appreciate. This is from the Toastmasters magazine. This is from November of 2021. It's a kind of an oldie but a goodie. It's from Toastmaster to trainer. I joined Toastmasters because I was a trainer and I really wasn't very good at giving speeches and presentations. It's a different skill set that I really just didn't have. But being in the corporate sector, there are times that I have to give a proposal, I have to give some sort of presentation, and I'm used to this where we're all interacting and we're all chatting and having a discussion, and that's really not how those proposals need to go. So that was my why for joining Toastmasters. But what I find in a lot of training sessions is that the reverse is true. That I'm giving a speech, I'm giving a presentation, I'm going to go from start to finish and maybe address questions at the end. And I would like to challenge anyone to let yourself be disrupted, let the presentation be interrupted, and address the people's needs where they are. So speaking of slide decks, there is a link that we'll drop into the chat here momentarily that is all about the club officer materials. There are slide decks, PowerPoint presentations, and there are also facilitator guides. Oh boy, how many of you have ever worked with a facilitator guide? Okay, I'm only seeing about a quarter of hands. Not everybody is accustomed to working with a facilitator guide. The materials that TI presents to us are really great because it shows the slide number and then what do I do with that slide? Is this something I read? Perhaps this is something that I have other people read aloud, or perhaps it's just there as a placeholder. But it does give you some direction as to what to do next. And there are some really nice techniques already baked into the facilitator guide. So whichever, if you're planning on doing a club officer role, I encourage you to take a look at the facilitator guide and the PowerPoint presentation and practice with them together, because it's a different skill set. It's a different sort of way to do training if that is not something that you are accustomed to. So anybody else have any comments about facilitator guides? That if you've used them, like any advice that you have to share for other people here? Paula.
I would suggest that you use that facilitator guide just as it is called, a guide, that you make it your own. Use your own language, put in some, maybe a little personal story here and there, and make it fun. Don't just read it, but make it yours and make it interesting. Because as we know, a lot of that language that TI puts in those guides are just very straightforward and bland, and you want to make it a little bit more fun and interactive.
Mhm. Great suggestion. Anybody else have any tips for the group?
I would agree with Paula. They tend to be a little dry and almost as if you were doing a monologue and not an interactive session. So I agree with making it your own. Certainly add a little humor whenever possible. But for new facilitators, I think it's a good idea. It gives you a structure and an idea as to where to lead the conversation. But by all means, we want to engage with people so that they feel empowered, and definitely making it your own goes a long way with helping people feel like, yes, I got this.
That's right. Yeah, make it your own. Your speech style is different than anybody else's speech style. So why wouldn't your training style be different than others? And it's okay to let your light shine and to be yourself and tell the silly stories or crack the jokes or whatever it is. Make it really engaging and interesting. When we were talking about questions, I had mentioned also that when people ask questions, you don't always have to answer it. Throw it out to the group. That's a great technique to get other people engaged. And you know how Toastmasters are. They love to hear themselves talk. I don't know if this is like news to you or not, but they love it. So yes, have them take some of the burden from you and contribute, because people do have things to contribute. And as a facilitator, that's the opportunity to draw that out from somebody and set the ground rules up front. Unmute yourself, just jump in, or please raise your hand, whatever works for you. You can have a very orderly and interactive and engaging session. It doesn't have to be everybody is unmuted and it's just kind of chaotic. Yeah, I mean, have everybody jump in. Questions, comments, anything so far?
Ah, the power of the very awkward silence.
Say more about that, Amanda.
I volunteer someone else to finish filling in the void.
That's right. Why am I waiting?
I don't have to answer that. No, I'm just kidding. I was like, and you don't have to answer the question. It's like, what do you say? I'm not answering that. You answer it. No.
Mm-hmm. But why am I waiting as the facilitator?
Oh, pregnant pause. You're waiting for someone to say something. You're letting the discomfort set in. You're seeing if it's all true about Toastmasters listening to themselves talk.
Yeah, that's part of it. Anybody else have any thoughts as to why am I sitting here in silence waiting for the rest of you to pick it up?
Because
You're
I might be
facilitating.
feeling the sense of saying something I shouldn't, or I would put my foot in my mouth, which I typically do.
Right. Yeah, guilty as charged. Sandra, how about you?
Well, you're making sure we're paying attention. You're getting the attention back if we had drifted off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It
Angela.
gives us more reluctant people the opportunity to finally speak up. I'm sorry if I just bumped into somebody.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Angela, what were you going to say?
You're giving us time to think of questions.
Mm-hmm. And why do you need the time to think?
Because we're processing a lot, and with that pause, you're allowing us to ponder, what is it that I need to ask? What am I still missing? So you're giving us time to reflect on what we are processing in the moment to see what comes up. And the
Mhm.
longer you give us time, the more we're able to really start thinking. So yeah, I appreciate him.
Mhm. Yeah, and if I can pick on Angela for a minute, this is the first time she's unmuted herself in 40 minutes.
And I love to talk, but I've been in training all day yesterday. So today I'm just like taking it in.
Right, it's just like Zoom fatigue. I'm done.
Yeah, no. Yesterday was complete training on how to teach inside of a Zoom
In a box.
Yeah, so we did through hours of coaching on that. So I'm just going to sit and listen and absorb. So yeah, you got a question? I'll gladly answer.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we want to do as a skilled facilitator is be comfortable with silence. Some people do need more time to process. A rookie mistake is I'm throwing out a question. A nanosecond later, nobody is clamoring to answer the question. So I'm just going to fill the silence. Don't. Just sit and pause and wait. Let it sink in. Similar to speech giving, like that's where there's a little bit of a crossover, is if you make a statement, let it sink in for a pause.
Well, and plus it allows the facilitator or whoever's on the one leading it, it allows us to calm down and to let some walls down. And I don't know, we kind of put ourselves in the other person's shoe and we're like, nobody's answering right now. So what is it that's really going on? I'm going to sit here and wait. And then finally somebody will speak up and then everybody, it's storming here. I might lose my connection, but everybody starts to participate then, but you have to allow that to happen and not just rush. But I know for me, myself, when I sit, because last night I ran a writer's guild and I asked a question and nobody was answering. In fact, a lot of them had their screens off. And I just sat there. I'm like, okay, guys, how long is it going to take before you come back with an answer? And finally, somebody started to speak up, but it took a while. And I just sat here and waited. And I thought, I got all night. I could just sit here all night and wait for somebody to answer because I needed them to be involved. I needed to hear what they had to say. That was the only way I was going to be able to move on with how to pivot with how they were responding to what I was asking.
I love that. And you'll notice while she's speaking, I actually close my mouth. I'm trying to hold it in because I'm so excited and I want to respond. But as a facilitator, we need to step back and let other people emerge forth. And there's something also that happens in your psyche that when you block your mouth, that other person also knows that you're engaged. It's a great time to grab a thing of water and refresh yourself because you might have been talking for a long time as well. So this is a nice pause for there you go, Bob. This is the time for the facilitator to overcome some of the dryness in the mouth too, and let other people do some talking too. So that's one of the many techniques that we've talked about already. That's part of the energy, the engaging, the interactive, the hands-on that we've been talking about this entire time. So appreciate that, Angela. That's extremely insightful, and you're right on. You're right on.
Rachel, one of the things that comes to mind as Angela is so articulate when she talks about her own experience is that part of being a facilitator or trainer includes giving the adult audience ownership of their learning experience.
That's right.
So that does allow them to revisit their notes, to maybe ask a question that they weren't ready to ask a minute ago, to find that courage to say, well, since nobody else is talking, I'll jump in and I'll say this, or I'll ask the question that has been lingering in my mind. So it allows that other person on the other end to take ownership of what they want to learn and what they want to do with that particular time.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And it's all right to let people jump in. Like if that's the kind of environment that you want, that's the interactive and people can contribute. In adult learning, we talk about the whole principle of packing your own parachute. Anybody who was Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, or military understands that term, that people come equipped with whatever it is that their experience is outside of this place, and they have something to contribute. So Kathy gave us lots of metaphors, and Maria has talked about her experience as a trainer versus facilitator. So lots of people have given us their perspective. When I did this, this is how the experience was. When I was participating in this, and you want to allow the space for people to contribute in that way, because they come prepared. There are things in their parachute that could really benefit the whole group. So allow for that space as well. I want to talk about some housekeeping items, and then we'll open the floor back up again. We do have a Train the Trainer session coming up. Now, we just sent out by the Constant Contact email today the JOT form for people to sign up to be presenters for TLI. We are looking for club officers, and we're also looking for some enrichment sessions. Some of those might involve things that would be helpful for a club, things that would be helpful for a specific event even. Maybe it's about how to do better open houses. Maybe it's about moments of truth. I don't know. Any of those enrichment things that are not specific to a club officer, but could in nature be a collaborative experience for all of the club officers to work towards a common goal and to really get developed in a specific area. We are requiring that TLI presenters do attend the Train the Trainer. This is a know before you go information session. So hopefully, if you're on the fence and you're thinking about, will I, won't I, should I, shouldn't I, that maybe this has answered some of those questions to make you closer to one side or the other. If you decide that you do want to submit that application on the JOT form, which is actually in the chat now, then we will go through the process of looking through all of the applications. And if we have like 5 different people who want to do president, well, we really only have like 3 dates. So we probably don't need all 5. But we're going to be looking through, and if your application is chosen, then I do want you to plan on attending the Train the Trainer, which is going to be on July 7 at 7 p.m. also on Zoom. So keep that date in mind. For TLI, we're going to be having 3 different dates. All of them are on Zoom, and we're looking for presenters and moderators. And we may need some help with like customer service area that can help guide people in Zoom world as well. Our first date is going to be Wednesday, July 20th. This is going to be an express session where it's club officers. We're not going to have a lot of enrichment sessions. We typically have 1 session that is meant for the Golden Gavel, and we'll have those for all 3. So please make sure you're thinking about those dates. If you want to be a presenter or a moderator, do 1 or do 2 or do all 3. However you want to fill out your bingo card, that would be great. The second date is July 23rd. That happens to be a Saturday. We're going to start TLI at 9 a.m. on that day. And the third date for our district is going to be Sunday, August 28th. That is, again, a Sunday, and that's at 12:30 in the afternoon. These are all Eastern times. So those are the dates that we're looking at, and it is on the JOT form, and you can check off as many dates that you are available to be a presenter or a session moderator. So those are the things we want to talk about. I encourage you to take a look at the JOT form, think about some of the things that we've talked about here, and reach out to me. if you have more questions, you want to talk a little bit more about training and facilitating, call me, text me. I'll actually put my contact information into the chat as well. Call me, text me, or WhatsApp me, or I'm pretty much on so many different channels these days. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm pretty responsive over there too. But I'm going to open it back up. So what have we talked about? What questions do you have? What do you need to make a decision about being a presenter for TLI or a moderator?
Rachel,
Yes.
I just want to clarify, if I have done this before, do I still need to attend Train the Trainer? I've trained many times in the past.
I am glad that you asked that question. And the answer is yes, because we're trying to level set with the district. We know that people have been involved in TLI for many years, probably both the summer and the winter sessions. And it may have been a while since we've touched base with the Train the Trainer session. And we really want to give people the opportunity to increase your skill set and continue to develop and grow as a facilitator and a trainer. And I don't know if Vicky or Paula, being on the trio, if you have things about the district goals that you'd like to share about why we're making this required.
Well, certainly, I think that what you said about leveling is really critical. It's important that we all come from a common base, and stuff changes. It changes all the time. But also, it's so important in our training and train the trainer groups that we have the same advantage like we have here. We have people who have experience and people who maybe have less experience. They can learn from one another. We need that wisdom and suggestion for those people, just as we've had ideas that maybe some of us have never heard of before, we're going to incorporate. And finally, we are going to tap into a few of the adult learning requirements or behaviors. For example, just that whole idea of training on Zoom, that's a whole new vehicle. So I think we need to focus a little bit more on that. How are you going to engage? What are you going to do? What's the best way to facilitate those kinds of sessions? When there's something new, everybody can learn. And I certainly hope that everybody can contribute to the core knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have anything that they want to talk about before we close out our session? We're about 7 minutes out.
Rachel, I know you mentioned the sessions, but each session also has multiple officer sessions. So for example, even the quick one is probably going to have 2 sessions for each office. So if you're applying for a session, and I'm not sure that our jot form actually asks this question, it asks which dates are you available, but think about the time, because we would love for you, we would like that consistency if you can perhaps present at, both sessions that are going to be on each day.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we also have it on the jot form for you to consider your own training needs. So if you are serving the role of a specific office, we want you to be able to get credit for your office as well. So that could be as a presenter, or it could be as a moderator. And we try and really address all of those needs for our officers, both presenters and for moderators. Tina, you have your hand raised.
I'm getting ready to unmute myself. You mentioned earlier the 5 moments of needs. What are they?
I don't know.
We can take that offline. It's a really great concept that talks all about what are the 5 major moments that somebody needs to learn something. So for example, one of them would be when you're starting something new, and that's going to be one of our focuses for TLIs. We're going to have a lot of new officers coming in that they've never been to officer training before. And I don't know about your clubs, but a lot of times I've encouraged people to attend officer training anyway, so they can have an information session like this and start considering, is that a role I might be interested in taking up in the future? Anybody else have anything?
You may have to send us all a message because I know I'm now curious about those 5 moments as well.
Yeah.
You have me really wondering.
Is that the correct link for the applying for the trainer? It looks like it might be to sign up for TLI. Maybe.
Oh, excuse me. Perhaps I put the wrong one in. I'll double check.
Yeah, we can double
I
check.
just used the jot form and filled it out completely while we were discussing this, and it went through.
Great, great. Thank you. While Vicky is looking for that, just to verify that we have the right link, and that was also sent out earlier today from the district in your email. So please check that as well. I'd like to go around the room. Tell me one thing that you've learned today. Tina, I'm going to start with you because you're in my top corner of the Brady Bunch box.
DJ, be quiet. Well, several things I learned. Some very powerful language throughout this session. For example, learned about the awkward silence, ownership of learning, block your mouth. Silence is synergistic. Segu, is that what you posted in the chat? Did I pronounce that right?
The segue.
Segue.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Someone else. What did you learn? What did you learn today? Floor is open.
As I mentioned in the chat to you, it said that training provides consistency of each of us as trainers to make sure we're on the same page and that we're delivering the same material and we have the same pre-advice on how to handle questions like Raha did when she handled disruptions during her speech.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Anybody else? What did you learn today?
The difference between a trainer and a facilitator. One being an expert in content and one being an expert in facilitation and process.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody had different answers and you're just kind of sitting there waiting.
Everybody's had different answers so far.
And I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
As you had said, Michelle or Rochelle, I would say that it is an art and a science. It is definitely pragmatic and practical, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maria brought that up. I'm just agreeing with her.
Okay.
Anybody else? What did you learn out of our session today? And I challenge those who have not unmuted themselves yet, like, this is your moment.
That this may be a ruse to find out who's interested in being a trainer for TLI?
I don't know if I like the word ruse, but you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Okay, so now I learned that.
Not a Ponzi scheme.
Not a Ponzi. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is one way to get the information out so people can make an intelligent choice for themselves. Yes. All right. Anybody else? What did you learn?
Vicky, talk to us.
I'll just add something
I'm
while
listening.
Vicky will close beautifully because she is good like that. But I would say that this is another way in which our district is creating value. I love that we all come to Toastmasters for various reasons. And perhaps somewhere in the back of your mind, you're thinking, can I do that? And how beautiful that we have this session today to ask and to receive answer to our questions, that there will be a train the trainer session, which will ensure that consistency that Bob was talking about, and that we have the support and the familiar environment in which we can continue to grow together. And may I say that these are transferable skills. These are skills that will serve you well when you go back to your work environment or to community organizations or anywhere else where you use your talents and your skills. These are skills that will serve you well. And I applaud the initiatives and all of the opportunities that the district gives us to continue to learn and grow.
Thank you. So we are at time. So if anybody does need to drop off, you're more than welcome to. I will stay on if you want to have additional conversation, or some of those introverts, you want to wait till everybody's gone to share what you learned. I am here for it.
And can I just say thank you so much, Rachel, for bringing this group together. You know, I look around the screen and I see all of you. I recognize all of you. And for me, one of the most important aspects of Toastmasters is this brain trust. This is where we learn. We learn by practicing. We learn by listening. We learn by sharing our experiences and being open for new ideas. And I think that, number one, Rachel, you've given us an opportunity to discuss those. I appreciate everything that everybody has said. Thank you for coming. And I certainly would like to ask this final question. How many of you think you're going to apply to be a trainer? I will hope I see some hands out there. We're going to be giving this. There's a limited time frame because, of course, it's coming up. So pay attention, and hopefully all those links will work. If not, check your email, because it did go to everybody as the usual reminders, and or contact me as well, and I'll be happy to send it out. So thank you. And thank you, Rachel.
You are welcome. Thanks, everybody. If you have to drop, then please do. Don't let us keep you, but we'll stay on for a little bit longer.
Good job, Rach.
Thanks.
Rachel, I have a quick question. I'm looking at the application.
Mhm.
It says enrichment session. Is this like pathways? I mean,
Yeah, anything that's not a club officer. Yeah, and Paula and Vicky, I don't know if you've had a chance to talk about Golden Gavel yet, what that one required session is going to be yet. But we typically have a required session for any club. Minimum of 2 officers have to take it in order to have their club be in the running to be a Golden Gavel club.
So that's a specific thing, and we haven't finalized those requirements yet as far as Golden Gavel, et cetera. We're still trying to finalize madly all of the incentives for next year and the awards. But typically there is something, for example, contests or MOT sessions is another one. We've also had, what were some others, Paula? We've had required the previous year. I think we required.
We've had pathways, I think 1 year we had, I wasn't sure about that, but definitely MOT we had for several years in a row. And
I think
there are other things. There are other things that are
contest.
really
You had to
important.
take a contest, how to judge. You had to go
How
through
to
a
judge,
judge's
Or
training.
just all aspects of content. We're going to have separate contest training, but there's going to be maybe contest 101. So people can come in and start getting their feet wet and knowing they're going to have to plan. Maybe at the club level, later we'll have area level. Also, any aspect of pathways, whether it's focused in or if it's more broad and general. Leadership and leadership experiences, things that are going to enrich the Toastmaster experience. Perhaps even some basic speaking idea. You know, we've had a lot of some, you've seen some of the agendas in the past. So those of you, all of you, what sessions have you attended that you thought were great enhancements for TLI?
And we will be finalizing the Golden Gavel requirements. Probably we're going to be talking actually about incentives this weekend. So hopefully within the next week or 2 at the latest, we'll have the incentives and the Golden Gavel finalized.
Okay. I've done a story on that and I've done a podcast on the Golden Gavel. So that is very interesting for me. Okay.
That's cool. Yeah, I'd like to see some things that are, this is up Sandra's alley, but like innovative ways to use pathways projects or Robert's rules. Like we all know we have to follow it. what kind of training have we ever gotten on Robert's rules, right? Or amazing ways to enhance your speech, like different ways to start it or different ways to end it. And some ways that we can learn in that way as well. And if the session is very popular for TLI, we may bring it back for the winter TLI, and we may bring it back for the conference. But if the session hasn't been chosen for this particular round, we may hold that off until the winter TLI or for the conference. So yeah, we're going to try and get as innovative as we can this year and shake it up a little bit and really meet people where they are and the kind of needs that they have. So, Amanda, you had your hand raised. I want to make sure you get a chance.
When Vicky asked about ones that we've attended in the past that were really impactful for us, I kind of had a flash of my club president this past year. Every time she attends an off-the-wall officer training, so delving into pathways, delving into base camp manager, those kind of things, she comes back just all sorts of jazz, like, guys, I learned this, let's apply it. So not just the officer role, but that extra, here's how to do even more with the role or with the program.
Even, planning, how do you work as an executive committee, facilitating and goal setting for your club, or that whole idea of maybe some of the social media platforms to bring in members or give your club a presence, how to really work on the excitement of a club meeting, and make things that are different. What are some of the kinds of meetings that you don't have to do it the same way every time? If there's only 3 things Toastmasters requires, that you have speeches, table topics, and evaluations. The rest is just frosting on the cake. You can pick and choose.
Right.
Also, if last year, if you submitted for last year for either TLI and or conference and you were not chosen, submit again, because we had an abundance of submissions. We had to turn away quite a few that we didn't want to, but we were limited on those that we could choose, the number of sessions that we were presenting. So I encourage you to, if you were denied in the past, put it through again.
Yeah, don't take it personally. Sometimes
Absolutely not.
we
Yeah.
truly do have multiple submissions for one particular presentation. Like, everybody wants to do VPPR this year. What's up with that? We only need 3 of them.
And the other possibility too is we're hoping to provide some mini sessions throughout the year. There may be an opportunity if you have some expertise in some area that would be, especially if it's sort of calendar specific, maybe, as we're getting ready for, contests, there may be something that you would feel you can contribute there, or perhaps club growth, or perhaps any of those sessions that would just enhance it. Coaching, club coaching, mentoring. What makes a good coach, a mentor? All of those
Starting a
things
new
are great
club.
topics. Yeah, starting clubs. Everybody seems to put that off. We really need that.
Yeah, that's a great one too.
Also, corporate clubs, that's a good one, because there is a lot of information out there that people need to know. Corporate clubs are a little bit different than community clubs, and whether it be maintaining a corporate club or starting a new corporate club, that would be a great topic.
That's how I started Toastmasters at State Farm Corporate.
Nice.
Club.
Oh, I started too.
Hi, Sandra. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Tina.